ministers and, and, and officers would be there. And if anyone would like to attend this, please let us know. We will be happy to invite you. But I think this is what is important here is that we have the kind of an energy system where we can have people come and interact so that you get the benefit of scale and of complementarity of the resources. Bhutan may have 30,000 megawatt of tidal power. Nepal may be even 150,000 megawatt of tidal power, and we will need that power. The other thing in promoting renewable is that we need the right kind of policy framework. What the minister was referring earlier, that Tamil Nadu, which a lot of this wind power is not able to absorb this wind power, is partly a flaw of the Indian government's policies, or maybe that our policies, states and Indian government. For example, if you want to have this, we should have what is called a renewable energy certificate or renewable portfolio obligation policies are there. But if one state has a portfolio obligation of 5% of renewable and another state has only 2% of renewable, what will happen is that all states would set their own renewable portfolio obligation at a very low level so that they become the supplier and there will be no buyer. What we need is a coordinated policy, a national level renewable portfolio obligation, so that it really has a possibility of absorbing all the renewable that we make. Somebody would be there to buy that renewable energy. This is also an important issue. And I think policy has really been a critical element in our energy problems. Mr. Mitra said about what things we have not done about electricity sector and the problems we are facing. But even in coal, a sector in which we have adequate resources and there should be no need to import it, we are importing 100 million tons of coal. That is, we cannot get out of the problem of denationalizing coal sector, having lots of private parties coming into coal sector. We have not been able to do that, and as a result, Coal India is not able to produce the coal we need, and so we are importing coal. So energy security, I think, has a very multifaceted thing, and I would perhaps invite other members if you want to react to any of the things that anybody has said, and then we'll open it to the comment.
Ask for questions.
Yeah.
We have been talking too much so long. I think the house is now open, so please introduce yourself and then ask the question. First gentleman here, we'll come back to you, Mr. Do you have a mic, please?
Hello. I am Shamshubra Sen Sharma, former government officer and presently advisor and lead editor of Integrated Management System. My question is to respected Dr. Parikh. You have mentioned about the diversity of procurement. Like if we make a supply line apart from one country to 10 to 15 countries, in that case, suppose some of the Gulf countries and Nigeria, they are all OPEC countries. But the supply from Gulf countries and from Nigeria, I just want to learn what is the risk factor, price factor, and the continuity of delivery schedule in terms of from the Gulf countries to from Nigeria, even from Uganda, because there are a lot of oils in Uganda. And what is the possibility of India being opening the new source?
Yeah, I think we should certainly recognize that even though we may have many different countries from which we have set up a relationship and import oil, the price of oil would be more or less determined by the international market. So we are not going to gain any significant advantage in terms of money, excepting for maybe Iran, because Iran is willing to accept rupee payment. That's a very different story because Iran has been blockaded and rather boycotted in many ways and so on. So they want to sell oil and they're willing to accept rupee payment. But other than that, I think even if we have different countries, we will still need to recognize that we will pay the international prices. Only thing is that even say Gulf oil cannot be accessed. At that time, we may be able to access oil from Uganda or Nigeria or Indonesia. But Indonesia has now become an importer. But similarly, I mean, many different sources we can have. So that way you increase your possibility of getting oil when you have multiple suppliers. Today India is importing oil from I think 15 different countries. And still the bulk of the oil is still coming from the Gulf countries.
Right. I think Mr. Parikh's point was that it was not so much about the price, because there's almost a cartel and all that, we know that. It's a question of availability. For example, it's a quirk of nature that large percentage of the oil resource is located in the most volatile region of this world. And therefore, if something happens there, and if all your oil sourcing is from there, you are in great trouble. So the question is therefore whether that can be distributed more than whether you will get benefit on price. Yeah, okay.
Just a small observation a friend of mine used to make is that he says India must have lots of oil. We must really search more and find oil because all countries which is Muslim countries have oil. So since India is a large Muslim population, Allah must look after his children here and we must find oil somewhere.
Yeah, please.
I am Dr. M.K. Ghosh Rai. I am President of the Millennium Institute of Energy and Environment Management, retired professor of IIT Madras. My points are regarding the contribution of Mr. Mitro and also the other members. Main points that what is the viability of the power sector from the generation to distribution. Well, generation is improving greatly because of privatizations in a strong way. Transmission is also improving. But main hitch, as he also pointed out in some way, is the distribution, where we are having political legacy of free electricity to agriculture, then very high level of theft in the urban areas. So these are wasteful ways. So one of the way to solve these problems is to privatize. You know, government's management of distribution is wasteful, as all government organizations is difficult to manage when there's a large number of customers. So this point, of course, he has not mentioned. This is a political dimension. That is, this is one of the reasons of the 2003 Electricity Act not being successful, in spite of various accelerated depreciation scheme and other things, because privatizations of the distribution has not taken firm root there. So this is a very strong point, which I think should be highlighted, that the power sector as a whole, unless it is viable, security, with all the availability of the resources from different sources by diversifications and all, but problem in-house, which makes the electricity sectors not being profitable or viable, is a matter of concern. Thank you.
Thank you.
Privatization is not a panacea. Let me tell you that. I mean, privatization was never the objective of the Electricity Act. The fact is that it's well known that India's oldest private power generator distributor is in Calcutta, the CESC. They have coexisted along with the West Bengal State Electricity Board in Bengal. As a matter of fact, privatization works only in dense urban agglomerations, because that is the cost of supply is much lower there. As a matter of fact, CESC has far lower, losses, both transmission, distribution, and commercial losses, primarily because of that factor. If you were to look at a large area like this state of West Bengal, which has, for example, the State Electricity Distribution Company, in the last financial year it had a 17,000 crore, turnover, and its consumer base is 130 lakh, upward of 130 lakh, 1 crore 30 lakhs. No private company is going to be able to handle, even in regional or even in pockets, be able to handle this kind of a spread. Privatization was never the panacea. Corporatization is what the Act, I think, strongly mandated, and that is something that perhaps has happened, but it has happened, as I said, 19 state electricity boards have unbundled, so to say, or structurally, functionally they have separated into companies and corporatized. But the results are not evident, and that is perhaps because corporatization has not happened in the way it should have. Undoubtedly, there have been political, interference and political, issues regarding purchase of power, pressurizing the utilities to purchase, particularly election times. At election times, if you see nationally, whenever there are elections, you find that the cost of power goes up. What is the position today in India? The power exchanges are selling power today. Power is available at 3 rupees a unit. There are no buyers. Are we to believe that India doesn't have a power deficit? Oh no, it does. India doesn't have power. The most convenient, the most oft resorted method of managing demand in India today has been by shedding load, and that's what's happening across the country. We are lucky in Bengal. We are an island unto ourselves. Maybe there are a couple of other states. We have surpluses. But the fact of the matter is that these are things. These are happening because of a huge financial distress that the sector is in today. That also has happened because banks were instructed to go ahead and give loans to utilities, distribution companies who didn't have money. And distribution companies, because they got easy access to liquidity, put off the more important thing of bringing efficiency into the distribution sector. State governments also did not signal that tariffs should be levelized, so that tariffs should at least cover the costs. And these are the two primary reasons for which a 3.5 trillion rupees debt is now, is now burdening this sector, which has come from banks and institutions. So what are the ways out? There are numerous. They are subject of perhaps a seminar in itself. It's not something we can discuss. But broadly, the fact that corporatization has not worked is a fact.
Yeah. Right.
Can I just add a footnote to this? It's not corporatization or privatization. It is really giving the managers the freedom to manage the system correctly. An example would be in Surat city in Gujarat. There was two distribution companies, one of the state-run, and another one was Torrent Power. Now, Torrent had a T&D loss of 8%, and the Gujarat state-run board distribution company had a losses of 20%. And the chief minister said, why can't you match them? And the officer said, sir, give me the freedom that Torrent has, and I will show you we can match them. And then he says, okay, henceforth, if anybody comes to you, ask them to call me directly, I'll give you my number, and you do whatever you want. And within 2 years, he was able to bring down T&D losses to the same level or even better than Torrents. So it is really not privatization or public, but it is effective control and non-interference politically. That is the critical element.
Just like any other sector, freedom of working and accountability. These two are very essential. We have to close this session. We have now overshot the time.
Just one
yes,
question.
one question.
Yes.
Very quick. Just the question, please. And one from here. These are the two only we are going to.
My
please,
name is
quick.
Mishra. I work for Coal India. Sir, I want to learn from this learned panel, just as a coal producer, what the value we expect, value addition from having a coal regulator at this stage. Because we as a producer feel that coal is not a service like electricity, like telephone, like airlines, like insurance, like bank. Coal is a global product, and we sell coal at a very less price in comparison to the global price, number one. Number two is that the coal prices have not been increased matching to the inflation. I am afraid, Honorable Minister is not here, but the coal prices during the last 3 years had not been increased matching to the inflation. So at this stage, we are afraid because that what the value addition will coal regulator will do at this stage, till we privatize the coal sector and till we have got the players in the place.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Parikh, a quick comment.
Quick comment would be yes, the Coal India should have the freedom to set prices. There should be competitive coal market. Private sector should be allowed to enter in. And the crazy report that CAG gave about coal gate is full of holes, logical and economic, that should be exposed.
The mic here. Last question, please. Oh, you have got the mic, right. Please.
I am X. Roy Chaudhary, energy consultant in Calcutta. My point is, I refer to the statements of Dr. Parikh and Mr. Roy, Mr. Mitra, Sunil Mitra. Point is, I'm in favor because a lot has been talked about distribution losses, and it is really remarkable that even in West Bengal, distribution loss has been brought down over the last 7-8 years. But nevertheless, as Mr. Mitra says, nationally it is about 21%. That is also very high. And when I hear Mr. Parikh that Gujarat has been able to tackle this problem, now my suggestion is that not that we can totally forget about this fossil fuel generation, but why not we go for distributed energy? That means locally we generate, we distribute in the small pockets, and then we connect it with the adjoining grids. And we should go in more for smart grid with the smart meters. I wish our minister had been here, because I have my appeal that there should be adequate support to the local entrepreneurs for developing this sort of energy generation and distribution through cooperative system. And at the grassroots level, the people involved in the villages or the areas, they can be involved. The employment will be increased, and they will be partners in that cooperative. So that way, their involvement will be more. And I believe this R&D should be developed by the government, that support should be given, and R&D also has to be for the smart meters, which is the in thing today globally. So that is one aspect which our panel could consider favorably.
Thank you. You want to comment?
Yeah, I had already commented
Yes, I think you have.
Distributed generation, where each village managing its own, is really kind of a pipe dream in some sense and too idealistic. We had ourselves, our institute had set up a wood gasifier-based power plant in a village in Gujarat. First of all, no village wanted to be classified as a remote village. They all want to be connected to grid. And even then, this village agreed. While we were there, the plant worked beautifully. After we left it, a year later, nobody was willing to manage it. They didn't have the skills and capability and cooperative attitude to run that plant. So I think we are expecting too much of a skills of management and of technical competence in different villages. And even if you have a village level system, you need a backup. The cost of all this would be very, very high if each plant, each village is going to have a backup power. Unless you think that we are going to have lots of these plants connected together and have a district level grid, which we call it the distributed grid, eventually connected to all the other districts, some kind of a system of that kind might work. But we need to think in terms of technical as well as managerial and technological capabilities in the system. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I just wanted to add one small point to Dr. Parikh's. See, you yourself on the one hand are talking about smart meters, smart grids, and on the other hand you're talking about cooperatives that are going to run these, distributed grids, presumably of local people. No, I mean this is an anachronism in itself, because power generation, power distribution, transmission, these are relatively technical businesses. You can't. We have done all these experiments in West Bengal itself. You are aware in Sundarbans, one of the pioneering areas of distributed generation was essentially in Sundarbans with the solar efforts that were done there. But cost. Today, why are we taking grid power to the Sundarbans? Primarily because costs are much lower. So there are all these elements that we need to address. It has to be a much more holistic determination than a prescriptive, local involvement in a high technology business. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm sorry it could have gone on like this. Energy security is such a huge subject, you can't do any justice to it within 1 hour's time. But main point is that today the whole world is facing certain security problems. And there are food security, there is climate security, there is cyber security, there is today maybe in India exchange security, and everything. So one of the major items in that is energy security. And I think we have discussed the basic points, but as Dr. Parikh said, that needs probably another session to do it. Thank you very much, all of you. I'm sorry that some of you couldn't ask the questions you wanted to. So right now, I think I'll hand over to Arun Mukherjee, Chairman of the Committee, Subcommittee on Energy.
Thank you very much for the very interesting discussion and the participation from the delegates. May I now request our Director General, Mr. Roy, to offer a vote of thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Mukherjee. Distinguished speakers on the dais, ladies and gentlemen, as we conclude the inaugural session of the 6th Annual Environment and Energy Conclave, I feel immensely privileged to have got this opportunity to propose a formal vote of thanks to our distinguished speakers on the dais, stakeholders of this iconic forum, dedicated to our commitment to sustainable development, addressing the bettering our response to climate change, energy and environment management. It has been an honor for us to have had the august presence of Shri Manish Gupta, Honorable Minister in Charge, Power and Non-Conventional Energy Sources, Government of West Bengal. Shri Gupta, during his very distinguished service in the civil services, was also Chief Secretary to the state government. It was most enlightening for all of us to hear firsthand the perspectives of a personality who has been at the senior-most echelons of administration in power and energy and policy making. It is our great good fortune also to have personalities amongst us such as Dr. Kirit S. Parikh, a living legend who has, in spite of the tremendous pressures on his time, always honored us by joining this conclave. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Parikh is continuously on tour all over the world, and he has flown down from Delhi just for this conclave, despite a number of meetings which he has lined up in Delhi today. So he took an early flight and will be flying back. A very big thank you also to Shri Sunil Mitra, former Revenue and Finance Secretary, Government of India, and former Power Secretary, Government of West Bengal. Shri Mitra had inaugurated the first edition of this conclave in 2008 when he was Principal Secretary, Department of Power, Government of West Bengal. And even when he moved to Delhi eventually to take the reins as the senior-most bureaucrat in the Finance Ministry, we have been fortunate to have his goodwill and advice with us always. It was also a privilege for us to have with us Mr. Phil Marker, Councillor and Head, Energy, Climate and Growth Unit, British High Commission, New Delhi with us today. Mr. Maka has spent many years working in Asia, Africa, Central America and Europe, and has been deeply engaged with humanitarian and sustainability work, including energy development, both at the level of policy making and on-the-ground applications. To hear from all these distinguished gentlemen at the inaugural session this year has indeed been a rare privilege. I'm sure all of you will agree. We deeply appreciate also the role played by ITC Shonar. We have year after year organized this conclave at this hotel, which is the natural choice of venue since it is the world's first CDM certified hotel. I would also like to extend my heartfelt thanks and appreciation to Team ITC for being with us in this journey this year as well. It would not have been possible for us to bring this event to you had it not been for the unstinted support of our sponsors. Our platinum sponsor, Coal India Limited, gold sponsor, ITC Limited, silver sponsors, Enfragi Solutions, Exide Industries, and SKF India Limited. Our event supporters, CESC Limited, DPSC Limited, Rohit Ferrotech Limited, Steel Plant Tech India Private Limited, the West Bengal Power Development Corporation Limited, Tide Water Oil Company Limited, West Bengal State Electricity Distribution Company Limited, and Williamson Mager and Company Limited. We would like to express our sincere thanks to all our well-wishers and delegates, members of the media and our speakers. Therefore, as we conclude the inaugural session, I would like to thank all of you for partnering us in this iconic conclave, which is now a movement in the sphere of sustainable development in the country. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a very pleasant task to perform. May I request Mr. Arun Mukherjee, Chairperson, Energy and Environment Committee of the Bengal Chamber, to please present a special token of our appreciation to the speakers. Dr. Kirit Parikh. Thank you, audience. And now to Shri Sunil Mitra. Please put your hands together for Shri Sunil Mitra. Mr. Phil Marker. Thank you, Mr. Mukherjee. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We have a very heavy agenda before us. Hence, we move directly to plenary session 1. Please be seated as we change over to the next session. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, the distinguished speakers on the dais. Session, the plenary session, business leaders panel discussion, energy as corporate security measure, experiences and insights. Ladies and gentlemen, you are requested to please be seated. We have very senior speakers for this session. You are requested to please be seated so that we can directly move on to the session. We'll just take a couple of minutes for the changeover.
Check, hello.